Okay, hey guys. So we're gonna go over the week 2 homework together here. So essentially, we wanted to create just a to-do application that lets you track basic tasks and if they're completed or not. And I won't read through all this, but we're gonna first create it on the front end, and we're just gonna use jQuery for it and just have a simple UI, and then we'll make it persistent with the back end. So let's get started. First thing we'll do is I'm going to just create a homework directory here and one more folder called tasks, and then we'll create our index.html. Okay, now we need to get jQuery, so I'm just going to Google for a jQuery CDN, which is a content distribution network. Minified, this one here sounds good. So okay. And let's also throw in, instead of writing all my code inside of the HTML here, I'm going to just create a JavaScript file for that. So I'll call it tasks.js since our project is called tasks. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this. So we can either double click this and run it from Windows Explorer or Microsoft or Mac OS Finder or whatever, or we can use another program. We can use something that will just host it for us. So I'm going to just go ahead and do that, even though the result is going to be exactly the same. So I'm going to use something called Live Server, which I'm not sure if Preston showed you guys this in the previous modules or not, but it basically creates a very simple Express server and hosts it on a random port. So we see my title here. I see, okay, favicon error. We don't care about that. So, okay, so we should be good to go here. So let's go ahead and start adding some of our pieces here. So first thing that we're going to do is we're going to add an input. So we can do this with IDs, with classes, with names. So we just need a way to find this specific DOM element. So I'm going to do this with the class, even though we can do this a bunch of different ways. So then let's add a button. Okay, let's see what this looks like. Nice thing about if you use Live Server, it will automatically, as you change things, it will automatically refresh your front end. So that makes it pretty easy. So okay, so we have our field here. We have our button. Obviously, they don't do anything yet. So let's add a button handler so we can actually go ahead and do something with it, right? So for now, we'll just get our task name to show up in the console. So let's go to our tasks.js here. So first thing we want to do is use jQuery, right? And I said is add task btn. That is my class for it. And I'm going to say, I think I can just use click. Here, one thing guys to be aware of is if we pass jQuery a fat arrow function, we won't be able to use this correctly. So if I do this, it is different than me wrapping it in an ES5 function. So for what we're doing here, this isn't actually going to matter, so I can just leave it like this because we're not going to change anything on the button. So let's do a console.log and say button clicked and make sure that we get at least this far. Okay. and that is not working. So let's investigate here. First, let's look at our page source, make sure that all these things, okay. Add task btn, unless I actually name this thing. Add task, nope, okay, so we'll just try taking our code that's supposed to run and just try running it manually here and just see what happens. So it looks like it did. Okay, so that's interesting. So now it's working. So what we might have here is a race condition that our JavaScript is running before our DOM is ready. So, and what we do there is we need to use a ready handler. So we can go ahead and do this for the document, and I believe it's on ready. So let's actually see if this works. Okay, so let's actually look up jQuery document ready. Okay, document.ready. So okay, there we go. So our click handler now works. So, and guys, I'm also going to make a lot of mistakes through this. Some of these are intentional because I want to go through the pitfalls that someone getting into this would actually run into, and just kind of talk through it, how I would find it, and partially because I haven't used jQuery in a while, and some of these things I'm totally going to forget that it's .ready instead of on ready. So, and that's okay. Most of this will be for your benefit. So, okay, our button click handler is working now, so let's get the text actually from there. So let's see what this looks like. So when the button's clicked, I want to say that my task name is going to be task name, and we need to get the value of it. So if it is an input field, we can use .val for that. And let's see what we get here. So okay, so awesome. That is working. So the next thing that we're going to do is throw all these into just unordered list. So let's go ahead and create our unordered list over here. So, and I'm actually just going to leave all that blank. So first thing that we need to do is, whenever this actually happens, is to get our unordered list, right? So I'm going to say that this here, we're just going to find the unordered list that is in our DOM. So we're only going to have one, so I'm not going to really worry about this here. And then what we need to do is append a list element to it. So we can go ahead and create a li element. So with jQuery, you can just give it an li tag. I don't believe you have to close it, so let's find out if we do or not. So we might have to actually close the li tag that we give it, but I don't think we do. So, and then I'm going to say li dot the HTML dot text. I think we can use dot text inside of it is just going to be the name of our task, and then we're going to say ul dot append li. So we're going to basically find our ul elements. We're going to create our list item element. We're going to set the text of that list item element to be our task name, and then we're going to append our li to our ul. So we'll see how this works. So I hit 1. And okay, well, we see stuff appending, right? So we're getting somewhere. So let's go ahead and inspect this. So we see our LIs have nothing inside of them. So okay, well, we're getting somewhere. So let's just do some debugging here. So if I look at my LIs here, let's do the first one, and I tried .text. Oh, that's interesting. So doing it here, that actually works. So let's investigate. Oh, you know, guys, I made a really simple mistake here. Is I'm setting the property of text. Instead, I need to be calling the text function. So everything inside of jQuery is a method. So there's a big difference between li.text equals name and li.text being called as a function of a name. So that was my mistake there. So, okay, awesome. So far this is working. So this here is kind of close to, we're halfway there, right? So as far as our front end, because I also want this, if I click on it, that it would get marked out and completed. So one more thing, notice guys that in the instructions I asked you to create a bunch of different get tasks, add task, toggle task, basic interface functions, and I'm not doing any of that yet. I just want to get this working first, and then we'll refactor it. We'll move things around, clean it up a little bit, but I just want to go through, as somebody who's getting into this, how they would actually think about doing this and code it out themselves. So the next thing that we need to do here is on our LIs, we need to add a click handler, right? Because right now we want to know whenever someone clicks on one of these, and to be able to mark it out. So, well, we can do this more or less in the console, because I can go ahead and just say, show me all my LIs on click So these should be clickable now, and we see that actually, yes indeed, that we can click on these, but we have something, instead of the click handler passing me the element, instead I'm getting this event instead. So this is the part I was talking about, that there is a big difference between using a ES6 function and a fat arrow function because of the way that ES6 handles the this context. So that's a little bit in depth, and we won't worry about that. Maybe next week we just discuss that as a class, but let's go ahead and rewrite this with just a ES5 function, so I can just show you the difference here. So on click, we're going to write function li, and here we're going to basically do the exact same thing. Console.log li clicked, the li element clicked. So now if I run this, oh, one more thing, guys, that's, notice I ran that code. None of that is going to work because it only applies to the li elements that exist in the DOM whenever I ran this code. So there was no elements when I ran this, but now if I rerun this, it's going to apply to two li elements. So now if I click on one, I see, okay, I see the exact same thing actually. So let's go back to the drawing board and let's look at jQuery on click and see what is going on. So click, here's our handler. Okay, without even getting to a part that I need, I'm already realizing the mistake I made. It wasn't the argument passed, it was the this context inside of the argument. So let's go back to our example here. I'm going to refresh this. So instead of actually having an argument of li, what I need to do is use the this keyword, because this is the context of whatever was actually clicked. So if I run this now, let's try this again. I click on it, yay, I see that my li actually shows up in here. So if I click on the first one, here it is here. So let's rerun this with a ES6 function just to show the difference here. So I'm going to refresh. Use the same exact code here, and we're going to just change this to an ES6 function. And I run this, and now if I click on this, I see that this inside of ES6, a fat arrow function, points to the actual window instance, not my individual LIs. So that's something that's really important for you guys to keep in mind, because I love ES6 as much as the next person, but inside of jQuery, it breaks, and I'm sure there's excuse me, there's a workaround for it. I'm sure we could Google around and find it, but this isn't a big deal. So to be able to just use ES6 for it. So notice that I have two different click handlers, right? I have the first one I did with ES6 that shows this, and my second one with ES5 that shows the actual LI element. So, okay, let's go back to our code here. So our LI is appended here. So what we want to do, and we can do this in any order. After our LI is created, I could add the click handler for the LI here, or I can just do it afterwards. It doesn't really matter. So I'm going to do it right here. So LI click. We're going to go ahead and say our function. And then what we want to do here is we're just going to say toggle completed or done or whatever we want to call our property, which we haven't created yet or anything like that. So, and I'm just going to say this. So I should be able to click on one, and I see toggle completed. Awesome. So now what we need to do is we need to add a class to be able to essentially strike out our various tasks as we get them done. So let's go back to our index.html here, and let's add a style tag. And I'm going to just call this completed class. So I'm going to set the color to gray. And text decoration of strikeouts. No. Okay, so let's Google around. So HTML strike through. What does that look like? Let's look at CSS here. Oh, text decoration. Okay, line through. Okay, so awesome. Line through, not strike through. So that's really good to know. Okay, so if we add the completed class to something, we should have a line through it. So let's go back to our JavaScript side here. And what I'm going to say is here, because this is our actual li element, it is not a jQuery element. So what we need to do is say var li here is going to be this passed into jQuery. And that looks really weird. Unfortunately, that's just how you do it. So once we have it wrapped in jQuery, I can do li.addClass, and I'm going to add the completed class. And I don't think I need a dot in front of it because I'm adding actual class. It's not a selector. But let's see what happens. So I click on it. Awesome. It actually gets marked out, right? So that's really, really cool. So it would be nice, and I believe I've kind of implied this if I didn't directly say this in the homework, is to make it where you click on it and it would, okay, toggle it being completed. So we need to go ahead and check if the class is there and basically remove the class if it's already completed, right? So in jQuery, there is a has class method that we can use. We can use a remove class method, but there's something even easier that we can use called toggle class. So, and that's what we'll use here. So instead of add class, I'm just going to use toggle class. That basically does all that for us. If the class doesn't exist on the element, it will add it. If it does exist, it will remove it. Okay, look at that, guys. So we have this more or less working. We can fix a couple things, like when you add a task, it would clear out the name and everything. So we'll get to all that. Let's see, how are we doing on time here? Wow, 18 minutes in. Okay, I thought I was gonna have this whole video done in about 30 minutes, but apparently not. I'm going through it in a little bit too much detail, but that's okay. So now we have basically right here in just these few lines of code, so what, 17 lines of JavaScript and about 20 lines of HTML, we have a front-end version of our task, of a task to-do list application. So this isn't, there's a lot of stuff going on here, and unfortunately this isn't very maintainable, because if we wanted to, for example, move this to the back end or whatnot, this would just be a mess trying to do this here, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to refactor this just a little bit and use the functions that I defined for you, and we'll talk about each and every one of them. So first we have a get tasks function that essentially would return just an array that will keep our objects of each task, right? And I mentioned here that we have a name and a completed property. So let's go through this step by step. So instead of having right now, we don't even have an array for tasks, right? We're keeping the DOM is basically keeping our list of tasks. So let's change that around a little bit. So right now I'm going to say var tasks equals just an empty array. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create our tasks. So here I'm going to say var task equals an object, right? The name of the task is going to be name. Completed is going to start out as false. And we're going to say tasks dot push task. So, okay, that works. This still doesn't really help us, right? Because our DOM, it's still, these are basically mirroring each other now, right? We have a structure in JavaScript that is tracking our tasks, but so is the DOM here. So we want to separate these two out a little bit. So what we can do is we can create a function that runs that instead of, or actually here, we'll do this without even making any more functions. Instead of appending our name, we want to use our tasks, right? So we could take a baby step here and say, hey, append task.name, but let's go ahead and do this like we're actually looping through it. So we have the UL, and what we're going to do here is say tasks.for each task, and here we can use ES6. We're going to go ahead and create a list element here, and we're going to say the text of it is now. So here we're going to pretend that we don't have the rest of this code here. So I don't have name or anything because we're looping through each of the individual tasks, right? So I'm going to say task.name. And one more thing I'm going to do here is check if task.completed is checked. And if it is, we're going to go ahead and add the completed class to it. So I'm going to say if task.completed li.add class of completed. So, and basically when we're looping through here, we can go ahead and add the same code right here. We'll move this. This code doesn't really fit well here, but that's okay. We'll go ahead and refactor that shortly. So, okay, let's see what we have here. So, we add one. We see, okay, we see that we add something, and it basically adds everything before it as well. So we have a lot of duplicates. And the reason we added 4 things, but we ended up with a lot more, the reason is that every single time we add something, we're looping through the array and adding everything again. So we need to basically have, every time that we loop through here, we need to clear everything on this UL element, right? Because every single time we add one thing, it will just keep multiplying. So jQuery has something for that. I believe it's empty or drop children or something. Awesome. So it is not empty. So let's go ahead and Google around. jQuery, oops, remove children. Okay, actually looks like .empty would have done it. Oh, well, okay. This is where having actual live class is useful because somebody will point it out that, hey, I had a typo there. So, okay, awesome. So .empty does actually work. So if we run .empty after each time, this will actually work correctly. So let's go back in here. So before we start looping through our tasks, let's go ahead and say ul.empty and try this again. So let's do 1, okay, 2, 3. Okay, so this is working now, and our click handler, that's working as well. So okay, awesome. So we kind of have the basic pieces now that we can start abstracting this into separate functions, right? So this is basically our add task function. So let's go ahead and do just that. So I'm going to make a function, add task. Here's the name of our task. And that's all it does. It doesn't interact with jQuery or the DOM or anything. That is all it does. So one more thing. So we talked about a get tasks function. That's going to be a little silly here because get tasks is just going to return task array. But whenever we're using a backend server, it is going to actually be very useful for us. So get tasks. Here we're just going to return tasks. So, and then we'll worry about our completed here, but we need one more function called display tasks now that will basically use jQuery and loop through our tasks and do all that. So that I can basically just take this verbatim here. So one more thing is that we see inside of our display tasks, it's also adding this click handler, right? That is toggling a class, but this toggling the class doesn't actually change it in my tasks array. So we want to fix that. We want to change this around, and we had one more function called toggle task that we're going to use for that. So in toggle task, we're going to get the task name that we're toggling. We could do this a couple of different ways, but let's see what this looks like with the name. So if we have the name of a task that we click on, we want to be able to find the task in our array of tasks, right? And then go ahead and change the property and call display tasks again. So right now when you click on it, I don't want to do any of this essentially. So I don't want to toggle the class like this. What I want to do, because basically this is what this does when it loops through. So whenever it's clicked on, all I want to do is call toggle class with the name of whatever was clicked. So I'm going to do li.text to get the name of whatever I clicked. So let's go ahead and just because this is there's kind of a lot of moving parts now, let's go ahead and use console.log to make sure that this is actually working. So toggle task. And let's check this. Okay, I add my task. Notice that nothing is displaying because inside of our, basically we gutted our jQuery here. So we're getting the name of it, button clicked, but we completely forgot to call add task. So let's call add task of name. And once it's added, we do want to call display tasks so we can actually see those actual tasks. So let's try this again. So here's one. Okay, so here's one. If I click on this, I see toggle task of 1. Okay, so let's work with that. So now we have the task name that we're working with. We actually need to get the task object from the tasks array. So there's a couple different ways that we can do that. We can loop through it. We can use, essentially we could just do a regular for each or for loop, or we can use tasks.find. So, and let's do that. So I'm going to say var task is going to be tasks.find, and here this callback inside is just whatever. If this returns something truthy on the individual tasks elements, it will return, and that'll be our task. So what we want to do is we want to basically return whenever the task.name is equivalent to the name passed into our function, right? So, and we can go ahead and do this in kind of baby steps here. So we're going to say the name equals this, and then our task, let's see what that actually equals, and see if we're on the right track here. So if I click on this, awesome. So I see that I have a name, and indeed it found a task with that name and completed false. So one more thing that we want to do, this right now, the way that this is working, this should never happen, but we should check if task somehow it isn't found. We need to bail out here, because basically what we're going to do now is we're going to say task.completed equals bang of task.completed. And then once we toggle the completed flag, we want to go ahead and call display tasks. So let's see what this looks like. So okay, awesome. So we have something now that our individual model, our array of tasks, and our helper functions, they are completely separate from the actual jQuery implementation. So we've divided those out. So now this is all handled on the front end, we can change this now and move this to the back end. So first we have a couple more pieces of cleanup here that I'd like to do. So that's okay. We're adding a task here. One thing that we do want to do is once we add the task, we have the name. We're going to go ahead and set the value of the task name to be just reset it back to blank. So okay, so it clears it out now. And one more thing is, if the task name is blank, we shouldn't allow you to add blank tasks, because that's just not nice. So I'm going to just do a quick check here and say, hey, if no name, just return. No big deal. So let's see. Wow, we are 30 minutes in and we just got our front end done. Let's make sure there's nothing else weird here. So okay, so this looks good. There's a lot of cleanup that we can do. We could streamline this. Instead of passing in the name, we could pass in the actual li element. We can get rid of this var li and just use this in here. I'm not going to worry about those things there because that's just optimization. But let's go ahead now, and now that our front end is working, create the back end portion of it. So we're going to refactor this a little bit, because here in this HTML task.html, that is all of our front end pieces. And I'm going to go ahead and just create a new folder called public in here, and we're going to move those pieces into it. So let's go ahead and do that, and let's move this in there. So, and now inside of tasks, I'm going to go ahead and create a new server.js, and this is going to be just our usual Express server, right? So I'm going to say const express equals require express, const app is just going to be express here. We're going to do app.listen, sure, we'll use port 3000. We need to serve our front end, and we can use express.static for that. So I'm going to say app.use express.static of our public directory, and then let's just do a console.log listening at localhost port 3000. Okay, so this here should be more or less equivalent. So now that we have that running, I don't need to use a live server anymore. And in case Preston didn't go over that, we can install that with npm install -g for global live server. So, and I'm sure next week in class I'll go over that in more detail. But okay, so now if I do node server.js, I'm obviously going to get an error that I didn't install my express package. That's okay, so I'm going to do an npm install express. And because I'm actually going to commit this, guys, for you right now, you guys would have to remember, if you download this off of GitHub, you'll have to remember to install Express yourself. So one thing I can do is I can do a npm init, and this here will ask me the name of my application, the version, description, all these questions. We can just hit enter for all these. So once we do that, it creates a package.json for us. And notice that it already has an Express dependency. But whenever you download this, you can just do an npm install inside of the tasks directory, and it'll install Express and body parser and anything else that we use for you automatically, so you don't have to remember to do that. So okay, so now I can use node server.js listening here, port 3000, and we see, okay, awesome. We see our application right here, and we'll just make sure that we didn't break anything. Okay, so far so good. So now let's go ahead and move some of these pieces to the back end here. So we're going to go ahead now on our server. We need to move our tasks array and some of these functions back over, because right now our front end is still tracking all the stateful pieces are on our front end, right? Because if I refresh this, even though we're using a node server now, all of our tasks disappear. So, and that sucks. So we're gonna move these things just piece by piece. So first thing we're gonna do is create var tasks. So we can basically copy some of these functions directly, add task, toggle task, to our backend. Obviously, we're not going to have a display task, but let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to have our own backend version of add task here. So function add task of name, and this is just going to be the exact same thing, the task. That's it, right? So a way to get the task, we're not going to worry about it because on the back end, we're just going to use our tasks array. Later, when we have a database, we'll have a get tasks function. For now, we won't worry about that on the back end. So right now, let's go ahead and add some express handlers to do some of these things for us. So I'm going to do app.get whack tasks. This is our request and our response here, and whenever you go to whack task, we're just going to do a res.json of our tasks array. Okay, so far so good. And let's do one more to actually add the tasks now. So app.post. So if you post to whack tasks, request response, we're going to go ahead and call add task here. So one thing that we need to figure out is what we're actually posting, right? What is our request.body? Is that going to be an entire task object, or is that just going to be the name that we're going to use? So for right now, until, if we add more features to this where we add task priority and things like that, we may want to pass in more than just a name, but for right now, the body, it is just going to be an object with the name. That's the only thing I'm going to care about. So I'm going to expect rec.body.name to exist. We're going to add the task, and then we're just going to do a res.json of all the tasks. So let's go ahead and get these two pieces working, and then we'll worry about toggling the completed flag and things like that. So let's go back to our front end now. So right now we don't have our tasks array, right? Get tasks, we're going to change that around. Add task, that's not going to work. Toggle task, we're just going to ignore this completely for a second. So the rest of this should be good. And we basically gutted this thing, so it's... Oh, let's refresh this. Okay, awesome. So nothing, this is basically broken now. So let's go ahead and take this one step at a time. Let's first get tasks and display that, right? So while we're playing with this, let's go ahead and I'm just going to, since we have an empty task array, I'm just going to add in some fake tasks. Server task 1 and server task 2, just to have something in there for the server to return. So, and one more thing, guys, I'm using Node here. I'm going to have to refresh this or restart this Node instance every time, so I'm going to change this to NodeMon. That restarts my server for me automatically. So now if I go to whack 3000 whack tasks, I should see the JSON of our server tasks. Okay, awesome. So that's good. So we just need to get this to show up in our front end, right? So one thing is that we can use jQuery for that. And let's see what this looks like. So if I do a jQuery get, so we see it takes a URL, data, success. Okay. Let's see what else. I was hoping that it returns a promise here. Okay, so basically it essentially returns a promise as well for us, which is good. So let's go ahead and try this now. So on our front end, our get tasks now. So let's get rid of our array because we're not keeping anything stateful on our front end. So our tasks here is now going to be jQuery.get. whack tasks, and because this is a promise, we can do .then on it, and we should have, it should return, well, we'll see if it's JSON or not, right? So let's just see what this first argument of tasks is going to be. So I'm going to do a console.log of get tasks, and we're going to return tasks and just see what this looks like here. So and I'm just going to immediately call get tasks just so we can see what this looks like. So if I refresh here, I see get tasks. Awesome. So jQuery is smart enough to know if our backend server returns JSON to go ahead and parse it for us. So that's really, really awesome. So let's go ahead and get this to work now, because it would be really nice that we know that our server has 2 tasks for us already defined. Because if we go to here, whack tasks, we see here's our 2 tasks. It would be really nice that as soon as we refresh our front end, those tasks show up, right? So let's go ahead and do that. And we can do this a couple different ways. We can get tasks and essentially immediately call display tasks. Notice that display tasks uses the task array that we don't have defined globally anymore, right? So we could do this a couple different ways. We could redefine it globally, or we can just add tasks as an argument for it. So if that's what we do, then we can essentially say get tasks, console.log, display tasks of those tasks. And then we can call get tasks as soon as jQuery is ready. So as soon as our front end is ready, it will go back to the server and get tasks. Okay, there we go. So we see here are our server tasks. So really, really awesome that that's working so far. So let's go ahead now. The next step here is be able to add tasks, right? Because if we refresh this, we see our server still has 2 tasks. I want to be able to send a task to the backend. So, and our so right now our click handler here, we're still calling display tasks afterwards. We don't want to do that anymore. So add task, we need to send a post event to the server that will trigger this route handler, right? And we're going to just have a body that has name in it. So let's first go to the jQuery documentation here. So jQuery post, and actually post JSON, exactly what we need. So let's see what this looks like. Looks very similar, right? Here's our URL, here's our data, data type, default intelligent guess. Okay, we'll see how intelligent this is. So here we should be able to do this dot post to whack tasks, and this here should be our actual arguments, and we talked about is just going to be one name property, and that's it. And this should return the exact same promise essentially that we had before of tasks. So I'm going to essentially just copy this directly here, and I'm just going to say, hey, add task, this is it, what it returns. So, and let's see what this looks like. Oops. Okay, so let's add 1. We see, okay, task 28, so we forgot to comment something out. Task 28. Let's try that again. Okay, awesome, look at that. So we see something happened here, but we got a 500 error from our server. A 500 error is basically the worst kind of error that you can get from your backend. And if you look here, we see cannot read a name property of undefined. Well, that's pretty crappy, right? So let's go back to our server. And you guys in the audience that are paying attention, you're like, Sergi, you forgot body parser. Express has no way to know that whatever you post into it here. So if we look at our post request, we see, oh, we actually have one more problem. That's interesting, that jQuery is posting this as form data, which we could probably use, so let's see what this looks like actually. First of all, let's go ahead and get body parser in here. So const body parser equals require body parser. And let's go ahead and do an npm install of it. So I'm going to do it npm install -- save, so it gets added to my package.json. And I believe newer versions of npm do that automatically. I'll have to check on that, but just have it for me. So once we have that, let's go ahead and use, now I'm going to say app.use body parser .json. So if JSON is sent, it will actually work. But there's also one more that we can use. We can use app.use body parser I believe it's URL encoded, which lets us handle URL encoded post requests. So let's see if that actually works, what happens. And since this is kind of a crapshoot for us, I'm going to go ahead and just do a console.log in here of post whack tasks of whatever rec.body is to see where we are. So on our backend server here. So nodemon server. Not sure what that means yet. Let's look at that. So deprecated, that's not an error, so just something to be aware of. So let's go ahead and refresh this, and let's type 1, click add, and I think that actually worked. If we look at our backend here, we see post whack tasks, and that was what was sent to the server. So if I refresh this now, 1 is going to stay there. Awesome. So I can go ahead and duplicate this task and type in 2, or excuse me, duplicate this tab, and it'll get added. I can refresh my first one, 2 will show up. So now our stuff is stateful on the back end, which is really exciting because that means I can just close all those, go right back to it, and I see my tasks here so that they're still stateful. So the last thing that we need to do now is make it so we can actually toggle a task. So we can do that a couple different ways. We can basically, the easiest way would be just to post to a whack toggle and pass in the name, so that way it's kind of a similar way that we're handling toggle task here. So let's go ahead and actually handle that. So first thing that we're going to do is we're going to kind of separate that. Notice what we have been doing is we have a function called add task. We should definitely have one called get tasks, but that way nothing actually touches this tasks array. Everything is through helper functions. And because of that, I will actually go ahead and add a get tasks here, because this is just, even though it seems completely unnecessary, having this abstraction, this installation is super helpful, because later when we have an actual database, like next week, when we're using Mongoose and MongoDB, you won't be able to return a tasks array, right? You'll have to use something like this. So here, so that was easy. So let's add one more function called toggle task, and you give it the task name. And we're going to basically use the exact same code that we did on the front end. Is we're going to find it, we're going to console.log it, and we're going to set task.complete, completed equals bang task.completed. So I'm going to take those verbatim here and move them over here, and that should actually be totally fine. So, and now let's do one more app.post to whack. I'll just call it whack toggle. We could do whack tasks whack toggle. It doesn't really matter here. I'm not really worried about those pieces. So about being too consistent right now. So okay, so all we want whack toggle to do is call our toggle task with our request.body.name. And then after that, all we want to do is basically just return all the tasks again. We can return true, or we can return something else. Like we could return something that says true or false here, if it was found or not. I'm not really worried about all that yet. So now And let's do one more thing just because we want to be certain this works, or if it doesn't, we have some debugging. So post to whack toggle, we can just see everything sent to it. So now on our front end, our toggle task now is going to do something very similar to this here. We're going to make a post request to the backend, so I'm going to just copy paste that. So we're going to post to whack toggle, the name, and then we're going to call display tasks actually. So that kind of handles it automatically for me. So, and let's make sure that our jQuery handler, we add the task. So here, okay, in display tasks, we still have our toggle task click handler that gets called. So this is actually awesome. Let's pull up our DevTools here. Let's refresh. So if I click on one of these, that's actually working. And if we look at our network tab, we see that if I click on the first one, we have a post request. If I look at this here, I'm seeing that we're sending the name of server task 1 to it, and then basically we're getting all the tasks back. So, and if I refresh this, it should still be commented out. So awesome. That's really all of it. So we can do a little bit of cleanup in here. Let's just remove this old code here. Let's go to our server side. Let's remove our actual, here, in case anyone wants to actually play with this themselves, I'll just comment that out. But guys, that's it. So we had about 50 lines to remove the white space and stuff, 50 lines of back-end code, about 50 lines of front-end code, and like 20 lines of HTML. So that is not bad for a client server task manager so that we created. So obviously there's a whole bunch of and here, guys, this is really awesome. I changed our backend, it restarted, and the tasks that were here, they're not there anymore. So notice that our server is throwing 500 errors because they can't read property completed if undefined. So the reason that's happening is if we look here on our toggle task, we're saying that give me the task name here, and if we actually look at the server on this toggle task, right here, this is what we're trying to toggle, but it couldn't find the task in our array. So we need to be good developers, right, and check to make sure that that exists. So I'm going to say that if no task, just return false. Otherwise, just go ahead and return true here. That's it. So let's go here. We're toggling. Okay, so we're going to leave the rest of this the same, but that's really good. So now if I refresh this, I have no tasks. So let's add 1. Let's add 2. And one more thing I'm going to do is just go to whack tasks here, and we're going to test, make sure that our code for toggling these things is actually safe now and we're not going to get any more ugly errors. So what I'm going to do is just restart our backend. So now if I go here, the server is going to tell me there's no tasks, but my front end here still thinks there are. So if I click on 2, all of them disappeared, but I didn't get an error. So basically they disappeared because we're trying to call the toggle task, and then it calls display tasks on whatever was passed back. So anytime you have client-server architecture, you're always going to have different basically state management problems that your states on each client could be stale, right? So where the front end thinks these things actually exist, but the front end is not aware of that, they got destroyed on the back end and they disappear. So there's different things that we can do to fix that. We won't get into that now, but I'll go ahead and post this and add a Slack link for it. So wow, 54 minutes. Okay, so this is almost twice as long as I thought it would take, but hopefully guys, this is really good detail for you, and it was helpful. Thanks so much.